Welcome, everyone. We carry on into 2024 with the Wrestling Collector Series, where we feature the top names and collectors in the wrestling card hobby. And today is no exception. We got two of the big ones here, Drake McGruder and Brett McGrath. And what these two guys have in common is that they're I'm not even going to say two of the top, probably the top two collectors of what we call gold and shiny, modern product, high-end parallel, the ones of ones, or the number to tens, the real good stuff that's worth the bread.
That's why they call them the big fish, because they're attracted by those shiny lures.
Yeah, the heavy hitters. So these guys are no exception. As we talk to different collectors in the hobby, we did a bunch last year. We're looking to do quite a few more this year. These guys would be at the top of the list insofar as their influence in the hobby. Everyone knows Stacking Slabs, Bret show, and it's not just wrestling. It's all sort of takes on the hobby, and it's got to be one of my favorite shows. I like to, everyone has their nicknames in the hobby. I kind of think of Brett McGrath as the sort of philosopher of the wrestling card world, because his takes on stuff are so cerebral, and I love it. It's not just straightforward information. And Drake as well is a guy that many of us in the hobby go to advice. He gives out a lot of pricing information. He's very familiar with a lot of the high-end stuff. So we're going to get right into it. Tony, Vela, as always, nice to see you. We'll start with Drake. Now, I know, Drake, this is old hat for you because you've been on many of these shows, but since this is your first time with me and Tony on Collector Series, I want you both to go back and talk about what got you into the hobby and what got you to this point. Drake?
All right, yeah. Thank you very much, and thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be on here. Yeah, so kind of going way back when, kind of talk about what got me in the hobby. My aunt collected cards, and when I was about 6 years old, she gifted me a bunch of cards, and it was like a Gale Sayers rookie card and a Willie Mays card and some old like 60s and 70s football and baseball cards and all that. And that was kind of like my first set of cards that I had. And then growing up through the late 80s and early 90s, that was, what's commonly called the junk wax era. And you could get cards anywhere. And whenever, you had a birthday party, what you got was a box of cards or packs of cards. And, when your report card came home from school, you would get, you got straight A's. So your parents took you to the hobby shop and you got to get cards and things like that. And so just really collected through the late 80s and early 90s. And just really have a similar story to most folks. Where my story differs a little bit is my first real job that I had is I worked at a retail sports store that also had a sports card section. And so I worked for him, and I learned about the buying and selling of packs, and folks would come in, looking for singles and things like that. But one of the things that he let me do is he would let me spend my money that he was paying me to buy packs and boxes of cards. And so it was kind of neat being able to see a little bit behind the scenes of how that whole thing works. But then I was also able to work to pay for my love of the hobby. And so I did that through high school. And then went to college, and at the University of Arkansas, there was a hobby shop there. It was called Justin's Clubhouse. Real nice guy. He had been in the hobby for like 40 years at the time and things like that. And I went in, that kind of scratched the itch, right? But then when you go into college, it just is a similar story with most people, right? You get distracted by girls, you get distracted by parties and studies and things like that. And yeah, and and sports cards kind of get thrown on the back burner a little bit. And so I finished up college, and one of the first things I did after graduating college is LeBron James was coming around, and I really wanted to get one of his signed rookie cards. I didn't really know which one I wanted, and so I picked up his SP Authentic signed rookie card, numbered out of 500, and a BGS 9.5 with a 10 auto. It was a real nice card. It was expensive for me at the time, kind of first job out and things like that. And then I remember growing up and going to the hobby shop and seeing the 86 Fleer Michael Jordan, but always thinking man, that card was $750. I remember the price tag. It was $750. I'm like, man, that was really expensive. And it was hard for me to believe that someone would spend $750 on a card. And of course now, if somebody spends $750 on a card, that's cheap, right? And it's why would somebody want that? So I got a Michael Jordan 86 Fleer. And I had those along with the cards that I had from when I was collecting. I was a big fan of Peyton Manning growing up. And so I had a lot of Peyton Manning cards, but that was like kind of my collection that I had. And, here and there where I was living in Arkansas after graduation, we didn't really have a hobby shop. And so, I would go to Targets or Walmarts and grab a box here and there, just kind of to scratch that itch, and just so on and so forth. And just kept going down that path. And then I kind of decided that I liked when I would go and I would see people's homes and stuff. And it looked really neat to me that they would have framed jerseys or signed helmets or mini helmets, and just they would have their memorabilia displayed. And that looked really cool. So I started doing that. And then my wife got onto me because the memorabilia takes up a lot of space. You can see behind me, I've got just tons of mini helmets and footballs and all that. And just past my left shoulder, that's where I've got my wrestling boots and some cards, and I've got jerseys framed on the wall and that sort of thing. And so she was kind of like, Drake, your stuff's taking up a lot of space. And, I know you like it. And, and this is kind of your room and it's your office and man cave and that whole sort of thing. But it's kind of overtaking the house. And I'm just not really feeling it, And so about that time, my son was old enough, and he was kind of starting to look at cards and was asking me about cards and all that. Well, I pulled the LeBron out and I pulled the Michael Jordan out, and I was like, I wonder what these things were worth these days. And I went and I looked on eBay, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this stuff is worth real money now. This is crazy. And so then that was like 2019, and I kind of got sucked in because that was when there was the train was starting behind the resurgence of the hobby, and people were saying like, go buy Luka Doncic and Ja Morant and Zion Williamson, and go buy these like the latest flavor of the week, like prospects and rookies and that. And I just kind of started doing that and got sucked into that. And about that time, I heard David Peck on the Lucas Tigers and Bronze podcast, which used to be around. And he was our first guest, and he was talking about wrestling cards. And I was like, wrestling cards? Like, wrestling cards are a thing, right? Like I didn't have any idea that wrestling cards even existed, right? I knew about the memorabilia and that whole sort of thing. Yeah, no, exactly. And so I kind of learned about that, and I saw that there was the vintage cards, and I picked up some of the 1982 Wrestling All Stars and the 85 the O.P.G. Hogan, and that kind of stuff. Just the characters and performers that I liked growing up. As a big wrestling fan, and like I said, I had wrestling boots and memorabilia and signed programs and all that kind of stuff. I just didn't know anything about wrestling cards. And then actually, I'll blame Bret for this next one. Is I think one day he shot me a message and he's like, Drake, you and I collect the same stuff. Like, did you know that there's gold refractor wrestling cards? And I'm like, really? and then I'm sure he'll speak more to that, but we went down the 2014 Topps Chrome, gold rabbit hole, and we're just taking the shotgun approach and just buying every wrestling card, but just having the time of our lives, there'd be something I'd find for him, he'd find something for me, and we're just sharing DMs just constantly. And it was great to have like a best friend in the hobby that collected similarly to me outside wrestling, but also inside wrestling cards too. And we still to this day kind of bounce things back and forth off each other. Still collect very similar fashion. Obviously, that's why we're on the show today. But that's kind of what got me into wrestling cards. And it's still just a lane I love being in. And I still do the sports with Peyton Manning and Drew Brees and all that. But there's something different about wrestling cards that I just really, really love. And I've really enjoyed over these past, 4, now it'll be 5 years, putting together a really great and unique wrestling collection that I can be proud of.
Awesome. Bret, tell us your story.
Yeah. So I've always been a collector of collections. You can see behind me, I've got a whole room full of vinyl. I'm a big music guy. And I've collected everything under the sun, 90s kid. So it was a rite of passage to walk into the hobby shop, buy packs of cards. Can relate with a lot of what Drake had to say. I can remember like I have a best friend, and him and I, like from the age of 3, have been connected through professional wrestling. We were at our brother's game, YMCA basketball game. And literally, like, I had a Jake the Snake Roberts and a Smash Hasbro action figure, and he had Akeem and Big Boss Man. And like that, like, we knew that we could kind of become friends because we both were into wrestling. And I remember like going over to his house as kids and watching like 92 Royal Rumble and old NWA tapes. And we'd sit there with the binder, and we'd have the classic cards, and we'd like fill out the binder, open up the packs. So like wrestling cards in that moment in time was like, it's super nostalgic for me to look back on that. But like what all happens, we grow up, we've got other interests, like stuff, moves by the wayside. But I had this like itch post college where it was like, I just want to start collecting again. And being a big wrestling fan, like it's, let's start collecting the vintage shirts. Let's start collecting memorabilia. Let's start collecting action figures. And I never really thought about wrestling cards in that moment, back just in my best friend's basement collecting classic cards. And it wasn't until I got exposed to wrestling cards again through, ironically, the Major Wrestling Figure podcast group, where they were doing wrestling card breaks. And I was like, what are wrestling card breaks? And that's when I realized there were wrestling cards. And it was about at the same time that I was getting back into the hobby because content was everywhere. And so that's really how I got re-exposed to wrestling cards and jumped in. And it's sunk its teeth in me pretty deeply. And it's just fun now because you get the opportunity to collect modern stuff that you can connect with, stuff you're seeing on TV, and also go back to some of the old stuff and feel nostalgic collecting the older stuff through new products. So it's like Drake said, it's a little different. The community's kind of goofy, kind of great. But yeah, it's something that I enjoy collecting quite a bit.
Tell us about Stacking Slabs, how that got going. It's a very respected podcast in the hobby. A lot of people listen to it, and I got turned on to it late. And it was your wrestling content that sort of drew me in. But then I went back and started listening to your older stuff. What sort of lit the fire into you to get that rolling?
Yeah, so I am a marketer by trade, and I create a lot of content for the businesses that I work for professionally. So I'm in this software, and part of what I do is build and develop relationships with markets, understand the problems, and try to tell stories through content. And at the time, I was working for a K-12 ed tech company, and we were spinning up a podcast because we were trying to build relationships and tell stories through our content platforms. And I was enjoying it, but like, hell, I didn't know anything about K-12 education. I was just like a marketing guy. And it wasn't until this moment where I started collecting cards again and realized how different it was than the last time I had collected that I had time on my hands, right? As the pandemic, we were all at home. I said, you know what, I'm not the only one who's going through this right now. There's probably a lot of other 30 plus, almost 40-year-old or older guys that are trying to figure this out. So I started the podcast as a way to just share my experience of what I was going through, just as a passion project. And, we've been running for almost 4 years, almost 400 episodes, which is insane to even think about. Right. But just the ability to build in relationships with other people has been just insane. And like building a global network just from a passion project has been fun. And wrestling has been a huge part of that.
Incredible. Big fan myself too. I really enjoy listening to your show. So to me, I thought it was a big deal. Like, wow, WTC is going to be on Bret's show. That's awesome.
No, and I appreciate it's fun. Like at times it's like I'm a new voice to wrestling cards because you all have been doing it for so long, and we all got a chance to kind of meet in Chicago, and it's just so fun to like meet people from the internet in real life, build relationships, jump on each other's show, do content. And I don't know, that connection point with other people who are in just this small niche of the hobby who are so passionate has been like, it's kind of like fuel to the fire. It's what gets me out of bed and makes me want to not only collect more, but have more conversations like this about wrestling cards.
It's what the collector card series has really kind of brought out too, I think, coming up with series 2 for us. And we've noticed that, in the beginning, it was just something kind of fun to do and didn't really understand. I don't think Paul and I don't know, I'm speaking for both of us, I guess. We didn't really understand what kind of a connection would bring other wrestling collectors together, actually putting faces to names. And then it got to the point where it's like, Well, Jesus, I'm going to get Bret to sign my card. Oh, I'm going to get such a, I mean, that's where we're getting at now, where people want to get cards signed by other collectors like that, and building relationships, which has been really cool.
Drake, we met at the National. I met both you guys at the National, and you walked into the National with a gold or the Undertaker and Randy Savage autographs from the '94 Action Pact. You know, one of your many, again, gold and shiny. Not, those could be considered really the first gold and shinies in the wrestling card hobby. And you didn't leave with them. You left with a Peyton Manning. And I knew that you were into Peyton Manning and Drew Brees, but talk about your football vis-a-vis wrestling. So, I mean, I get it. If you see a card and you see the dollars there and it's the right move, and this is what you're so respected within the hobby for, your sort of your mindset of how you approach some of these bigger purchases and how you're able to sort of, okay, I know this Undertaker and Savage might have personal satisfaction, but from a market point of view, I got to get my hands on this Manning while I see it in front of me for this price.
Yep.
How does your brain work on that to say, okay, I brought these cards. I don't know if I'm going to sell them, but there's a Manning. They go.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and it's one of those things. It's always having a nice variety, because you never know if trading is an option with a dealer, or it's a private deal or something like that, what exactly they might be looking for. And you may have a card and may think, gosh, like this dealer is really going to want this card, and it's a great card, but then they just skip right past it. But really the mindset there for me on those cards, or really with any cards, is, and Brett's much in the same way. If you ask him the same question, is, you have an opportunity to buy a card, and maybe it's a 1-of-1, or it's a card that you don't see very often. It's very difficult to acquire. It's very rare. It's very scarce. And you start going through and kind of looking through your collection, and you start asking yourself, like, okay, your dollar amount that you need is X, right? What do I have within my collection? If you're not wanting to dip outside of your collection and go into, and dip into your bank account, what do you have that can get you to that dollar value that you need to get that deal done? And of that, what's easily replaceable, let's say, right? And so when you look at the Undertaker signed card, and you look at the Macho Man card and that sort of thing, they're great cards. They have huge historical significance in the hobby. But I feel like with those cards, if I want them again, then I can go find them. And it may not be, I can just run to eBay right now and click buy it now, right? It may take a little bit of work and little digging and things like that. But when you look at with Peyton Manning and the number of like true full game use, like NFL shields that he has, there's a small, like finite number of those. And there's a few of those that are like 1-of-1s. And so it's one of those cards where that's a type of card that I like to collect. And so when I see that card, I'm like, okay, I've got to find a way to make this happen. And so I look for things that I could go find again if I wanted to acquire them, and that's the type of card that I would look to move to make a deal like that.
Now, is anything up for grabs at any given time, or are there some pieces that are sacred and full well they're never going anywhere?
Oh no, there's some pieces I have, that I say are sacred. Bret coined the term, I think, a coffin card. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to go like, that my wife at my funeral is going to throw a bunch of cards in the coffin with me. I don't really mean it like that, right? Because I think that cards are meant to be enjoyed by people and things like that. But there's just certain cards that really have a special meaning to me, and folks will ask about them from time to time. Like I get asked about the Vince McMahon Transcendence Superfractor Auto like a lot, and I'm just like, that's just. Yeah. And it's one of those cards that I don't have it in, I don't have an interest in moving. That being said, right, I'm not.
Sorry to interrupt. What if that gold 2014 refractor rock turns up that you guys have been looking for forever? That's sitting in.
Oh yeah, the Superfractor.
Yeah. Now what if that turns up tomorrow? And we know that we're never going to see it again. Is the Gold Rock Prism up for grabs? Is the Vince up for grabs? Is it Peyton, one of your top Peytons, up for grabs? Just trying to get into your head a little bit about where the hierarchy is in wrestling for you, and what ultimately wins.
Yeah. So what I would do is I would start looking as I would start going through my collection and figure out, okay, what's most replaceable to least replaceable. So like the Vince McMahon wouldn't be someplace that I would start at. The Rock Gold Prism is not a place that I would start at. Now, so like I've got a 2014 Rock Chrome Gold Refractor PSA 10, right? And that's a great card by itself. But if I'm going to make a run at that superfractor, then I probably don't need that gold refractor anymore. There's 50 copies of that. Then I can find another one. So I'd probably start with, okay, what's the highest number card, whether it's wrestling, whether it's Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, or whatever. I'd probably say when I look at it, right? So Peyton's my number one. Then I kind of go to wrestling, just looking at genres, and then probably Drew Brees would be my number three. So if I really needed to raise some funds for that, I would probably start looking to see like, okay, well, what can I get rid of my, from my Drew Brees collection first, right? And then start dipping into the Peyton Mannings and the, the wrestling and things like that. So it's really not a exact art or science to it. It's just kind of going through like, okay, there's 50 copies of this card. Yeah, like maybe it's graded a 10 or a 9.5 or something like that. But that's something that I could let go of that would give me the funds to put towards that rock superfractor. And then the other thing I have to think of too is like, is this something where I really want to leverage that much of my wealth into? Like when I look at that Prism Black 1 of 1, and I know folks have talked about that card is not a card that I'd want to spend $126,000 on, right? And I know that it was spent, that somebody bought that, it was paid for. I respect it as the first Black Prism. Would I love to have that card in my collection? Absolutely. But that's not a card, even to me as a rock collector, that I think I would want to spend that much money for. So it really depends on price as well too. And one of the ways I operate as well is a lot of times I'm not going to sell things before I acquire the card. So it's more like acquire the card, then sell. Because what I would hate to happen is move all this stuff and then something happened and you don't get the card, and then you're without a whole bunch of cards that you liked, and you just have a bunch of cash and you don't really know what to do with it. And then you start buying a bunch of stuff that you maybe really didn't want, if that makes sense, just kind of to fill that collector void. Yep.
What would you consider your top wrestling piece? Would you say it's the Rock Prism? Because I think it's your Vince. I think it's your Vince. I tried to buy that card. I wasn't going 9,000. I mean, I put in my bid for that card, and I think I was the first guy to email you when I found out it was you that won it. I'd buy it from you today for double that, but you wouldn't sell it to me for that, do you still think that your rock is more valuable than your Vince, or is there something else you have, or your Roman, or is there something else you got tucked away that we don't know about?
Well, it's tough when you start talking like value, like especially when 1 of 1s, right? Because it's what someone's willing to pay for it, right? And so when I look at those cards and what I paid for them, that's a value that I would still pay for those cards today. So that doesn't mean that they're for sale at that price. But then I think you also get into conversations with people where they're like, oh, well, they have a card, and they're like, well, Drake wouldn't sell it for 50 grand or whatever, so that means he's just trying to mark up the price too high. And I'm like, no, everybody has a point to where you say, if somebody offered me that would be a number where I would maybe think about moving it, right? And so that to me, I think kind of tells you what it might be worth in your head, like if that makes sense, just because you kind of have a number where it gets to a tipping point, right? To say, hey, it would be like financially irresponsible to me and my family to keep this card. But in terms of cards, right? I think the Vince is up there. The Roman Reigns 2014 Superfractor Auto, it's kind of in that same ballpark. If that makes sense. So certainly the Rock Gold Prism, we've seen a retraction in that. But when I look at that, and I spoke previously about the LeBron Rookie Auto, that the value that I traded that towards that Rock Gold Prism PSA 10 plus the cash. When you look at kind of the way things have the percentage that both of those cards have dropped or whatever, the LeBron has dropped a higher percentage than the Rock has, right? And so so both cards have dropped. The whole market's dropped, for the most part. But when you look at it, the percentage drop was higher on that LeBron card, because I still get questions all the time. They're like, you were such an idiot to sell that card, the LeBron card for that Rock card. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I got, $15,000 cash, and I was into that LeBron card for like $600. So,
that's pretty good ROI.
Yeah, exactly. So like my cost basis.
If someone's calling you an idiot, I'd like to have a chat with them.
Yeah.
Tony and I have had this conversation. We'll get to you, Brett, in a second about Golden Shiny. We've had a conversation before about, which Drake card do we want more? We both agree we'd much rather have the Vince. And I honestly believe it's worth more on the open market today. Yes, there's been a retraction in those goals, but I think you stole that card. And I know you're willing to pay $6,000 more at the time. That's where, your head was at. And I think it's double what you were willing to pay then. And I believe it to be the most valuable card, save for the blacks, but blacks are unicorns, they're the throwaway one-on-ones. But that card in my book, and I don't mean to embarrass you or keep gushing over it, but it's an easy one in my brain, having looked at the totality of this stuff, to say, yeah, this is the card, from the modern area. So speaking of modern, just coincidentally, you guys became friends because you both had this passion for parallels, gold, shinies, we call it, or ultra modern, or I call it gold and shiny. I think that's what everyone sort of understands what we're talking about. What was the allure, Brett, for you for those cards?
So it was mostly as a football card collector. I was looking in my collection, and what cards do I buy? It was shiny, gold, stuff that when I look at it makes me smile and happy. So I think I struggled when I came back in. I mentioned the breaks, connecting with certain products and cards, because what I was really looking for was the gold and shiny stuff, as you call it. And it took me to, and you zoom out and you look at like gold and shiny from a wrestling card perspective and gold and shiny from like a football card perspective. It's like football cards. It's like every 3 products is gold and shiny stuff. With wrestling cards, it really hasn't been that way up until maybe more recently. So I think for me, it took me investigating and trying to understand where's my lane? What are those sets? And that's why it seems like every time I'm on one of these things talking about wrestling cards, why 2014 Topps Chrome always comes up, just because that was really my gateway back into wrestling cards, because the cards resonated with me in a way that not only got me to go deeper into wrestling cards, spend more money in wrestling cards, but then begin to explore what are other products that are adjacent to this. And at the end of the day, like value, money, cards, it's all important, and it's all something that I take into consideration when I purchase cards, but it's mostly like a feel thing. Like I want, when I'm in a break at work, I've got my cases of cards over here. I want to open up those cases of cards and I want to pull out a card, and I want it to make me feel something. I want it to make me smile. And that's what that segment of wrestling cards does for me. And that's what's got me hooked.
I think it's safe to say the value was there, though. When I was looking at the top sales of last year, 2 of those Roman 2014s were in the top 10, the Superfractor and one of the gold refractors. So I think the market, you guys are on the right, I'm a set collector, so I'm upside down on almost everything I've ever bought. Whereas you guys, you're the stuff you have, in particular, the prospects are bright.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brett.
No, I was just, it would be naive for me to say like it doesn't matter and it's not a thing, because it certainly is. But I think for me, it's been, and I would recommend like anyone who's trying to find it's narrow in, not only on the segment of wrestling cards that you like. For us, it's the gold and shiny stuff, but then also like, who do you collect and who do you like, and narrow in on that, because I've never gone as crazy as you with the set collecting, but I have casted a wide net. And what ends up happening is those cards don't mean to me as much as some of the other stuff that I'm going deeper on, and I sell those so I can get money to buy the cards that I really want, which isn't a bad thing, but it's this like cycle that I've gone through. Whereas I go into next year with my collecting, I'm pretty focused on what I like, what's going to stay in my collection for a while.
Yeah, and the one thing that I was going to say, just real quick, right? You think of gold and like why gold? What's the attraction of gold in the hobby? And you kind of go back, historically, right? Thinking back to like the ancient civilization, gold has always been a symbol of like wealth and prosperity, and people are attracted to gold. And if you tell, just anybody out there, you're like, hey, I'm going to the bank to get some gold, or the gold rush of 1849, and there's just that. When you say gold or you say silver or something like that, there's just that instant like, wow, it's got that wow factor, right? Yeah. And so it's just, I think that's just one thing that attracts you to it a little bit is like, yeah, it's pretty and yeah, it's gold and stuff like that. But, and the more modern stuff, right? The golds are numbered to 10. And so there's enough of those where there's a supply where you can get one, but then there's few where, you're kind of unique having one, knowing that if you've got one of those cards, there's only 9 other people that could own a copy of a card in that parallel, which is pretty cool because it helps your collection stand out and be unique. The grade in essence really doesn't matter a whole lot because there's not thousands of copies of the same card, which I think is cool. And it's also neat whether it's a set like the Transcendent Superfractors, or it's like gold prisms. It's real fun to find other people that have like the other 9 copies of that gold prism, and you kind of form a community around that card, and it's really neat. And the same thing with like the chrome gold refractors. There's 50, so there's enough to go around, but it's few enough supply where in many cases you can't just go onto eBay and find say like an Andre the Giant 2014 chrome gold refractor. If you went on eBay right now, it's not there, but there's 50 copies. Just collectors really love those, and they kind of keep those, just kind of to themselves and that sort of thing. But it just has something different about it than, when you start looking at these other modern parallels, and there was a lot of conversation about like, values tanking for things like a teal out of 49 or a orange out of 99 or a red out of, 199 or something like that. And people were just really surprised by that. And I think to Bret and me, it wasn't surprising at all. There's certain parallels and certain colors, whether it's sports or wrestling or whatever, that collectors just really gravitate to. And the other stuff is great if you're set collecting or rainbow collecting or stuff like that. But when you're very focused like we are, it's a lot of noise, I guess.
One other thing that I want to mention is that like we this has been stated out front, but I think this is important to just like emphasize, and this isn't a recommendation to anyone, but Drake and I know this because we talked about it. We look at wrestling cards differently than people who are just collecting wrestling cards because we have experience in other sports. And it's not all apples to apples, but when you look at parallel structure, you look at scarcity, you look at shiny, you look at gold, and you look at things and trends that have kind of withstood the test of time from a collectability and value perspective. Like, I feel like we're approaching wrestling cards with that lens, where a lot of wrestling card collectors, which is fine and well, just collect wrestling cards and think differently. And there's no right way to think about it. But I just wanted to state, like, I think experiencing the hobby in another lane and seeing how it applies to wrestling cards or an adjacent segment that you collect in I found to be very helpful.
I think that's a very valid point. As someone that's been collecting forever, I'd buy sets and I'd buy relic cards and I'd buy autographs. And then there came a time in around 2006 or so, Tony will correct me, when the Heritage came out, where all of a sudden the parallels started appearing. And being a wrestling fan, I just wanted the card, I have your rock card, Drake. I spent $1 for it. But I have every card, right? And for me, it's to your point, Bret. I never looked at it that way. It wasn't until Peck in England and those guys started grading en masse the rare stuff, the higher end all-stars, that was the first time that I even contemplated a wrestling card as having value. For me, it was just, I'm a wrestling fan, I'm a musician, I spend my money, and I love this stuff. But it's very true, because even to this day, I don't care if it's a parallel or not. Like, for me, I want the card. It doesn't matter to me if 1,000 people versus 10 other people have it. And you're absolutely right. There's no right way, but it's a very different mindset for sure. And I think that what you've identified is that the way you guys, the two of you, go about it, is very smart from a bottom line point of view. Because like I said earlier, you're chasing down stuff that is always going to be highly desirable, I think, anyways.
Yeah. Well, and I suppose, like I said too, you're spending lots of money, so you want to, make sure you're putting it in the right place, right? And you don't want to, it'd be nice to say that these are all coffin cards, and you throw them in the coffin when you die, and
it's a great term, by the way, Brett.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I certainly can't take credit for that.
I probably stole it from somebody else.
But
that's wrestling for you.
Yeah, exactly. But you have to look long term, and it's like okay, what stuff has historical value? You know, like it didn't just become valuable in the last like 5 or 10 years, right?
Right.
What stuff has been wanted and valued in the hobby for the last 20 to 25 years? And you know, history repeats itself, and it tells you, hey, these trends are going to continue. So someday, you know, down the road, you know, if I need money to, you know, buy a second home or send kids to college or something like that, you know, then you hope that, yeah, markets are going to fluctuate, and that just happens with any market, whether it's cards, stocks, real estate, you know, coins, whatever. You know, you hope that you've put your money in a safe place, right, and not from a like investment type standpoint. You know, you just kind of put your money somewhere where, you know, you're going to be happy with, you know, if you do have to sell it sometime down the road, there's going to be somebody else to buy it, right?
And Brett, you mentioned that given that you guys both came from outside the wrestling world, from football and other sports, that gave you that unique perspective to sort of approach it this way. And I agree. Like, I think that opens the door to you pursuing things in a very specific way and being successful within the hobby.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like it's an advantage, but it's also, you know, sometimes you can get caught up buying something because you see what happens in another market and you're buying it because you feel like you need it right now, but maybe it's not the best time to buy. And I mean, it'd be, I think one example of that would be just like the drop of when the debut Prism product came out. It was like, I mean, I can't tell you how excited I was for that, just because like a gold prism was so significant to my football card collecting. And now that I get the chance to going down the gold refractor lane, now I get a chance to buy gold prisms. And when that product dropped and we all saw what was happening with those cards, it's almost like a blessing that went so parabolic out of the gates, where it was like, I legitimately can't afford these cards. To that deterred me. And then we all saw what happened. You know, all the people who don't care about wrestling cards removed themselves from the situation, and the cards went crashing down. And, you know, those cards have been steady for the last year or so. But that parabolic ride was like, that was an example. Like, we see you can feel it because I've seen it in basketball cards. I've seen it with new product in football cards. And that was just an example of like, yeah, sometimes it's good just to wait a little bit until, especially on new stuff, until all the crazy dies down. And because what happens eventually, you end up getting the opportunity to buy the card you really wanted 6 months down the road for a third, if not less, the price that it went for before.
It's interesting you mentioned the first Prism, because Tony, you'll recall we were warned. You remember that we wrestling guys, we better buckle up, because there's people from out there coming in. And they know about Prism, and they know about the values of these blacks. And I didn't know the first thing about a black rock, gold rock, whatever. I'm a wrestling card collector. I've never bought a football card in my life. But again, it brought in this influx of people, like you say, with these sort of the how can I put this? They came with other experience from other parts of the hobby, and they applied that. But I think what you're getting at, Brett, is that it didn't necessarily translate exactly to wrestling, you know, because we saw what happened with the prison box, and some people came in and made their hits. But I don't know that a lot of investors came into our hobby and killed it. You know, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that people, you know, you're speculators, you guys don't give a fuck about whether it's wrestling or whatever. They just, here's a hit, let's go in, let's try and make some money and get out. You know, I wonder, you know, did the people that paid those early prices on some of those blacks, I don't think they're, you know, making money. Drake, you talk about the retraction and the goals. You know, what are your thoughts on that?
I think I was just going to say, I think at the end of the day, with wrestling cards specifically, like, you really have to be in it because you love wrestling and you love wrestling cards. And I would recommend this to anyone who's listening, wrestling card collector or not. Like, don't go into wrestling cards and think you're going to make a ton of money. It's just not how it works. And so I think having like, if you were an individual who bought at a peak price, like, you better damn sure be comfortable with holding that card, and even though if the price went down, like be happy that you still have the card. And that's what I find unique kind of about wrestling in comparison to other sports, is that like there are so many like end users, like people buy these cards, and no matter what happens with the price fluctuation, they don't care, because like they just want the card, like you mentioned, Paul. And I think that's what makes it fun, and it also makes it scary for someone like me who is on a mission, because I'm not sure if I'm ever going to get a chance at that rare card again, because people aren't selling. So I just think it's, you just got to be cautious. And if something looks goofy and funny and shoots up too fast, like probably best to stay away and let the dust settle a little bit.
Yeah, and the one thing too is just to remember that you know, so it's only a loss if you sell it, right? So as I mentioned before with that rock gold, I've gotten multiple DMs that are like, Drake, so how do you feel that you lost $20,000 off where you got that rock gold prism? And I'm like, well, I haven't lost anything, and again, my cost basis on it was $600. So, you know, I'm not losing any sleep at night about that card. I love that card. I love it 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the road. I think it's it's a great card to have in my collection. But one thing I will say is that, you know, Brett touched on, and we kind of talked about looking at like sports to wrestling and things like that, and looking for parallels and things. One of the things I think that's been really unique in wrestling cards that I don't see in sports cards, and I kind of wonder if it changes, is around, you know, and let's just take the Rock Black Prism 101. You know, it sells for 126 grand, and you see comments, people, they're like, man, that's crazy. Like, why would somebody pay for that? It wasn't even signed. And you get this sentiment around wrestling cards as far as like, why do people pay so much money for gold prisms and blacks and things like that when they are unsigned? When you look at sports collectors, and I know Bret is one as well, and you see it a lot in sports where, you know, folks want the shiny cards and don't want a signature. But there's this big sentiment among just the focused wrestling collectors where if it's not signed, it's not worth any money, right? And I think that's one thing that I think about, and it doesn't really affect my buying habits at all. But it's been an interesting thing that I've seen kind of unfold as I've gotten deeper into wrestling cards. Is just the whole thing where like the wrestling collectors feel that value is based on having a signature on the card, and if it's not signed, it shouldn't be worth any money. And I wonder how that changes, and if that changes over time.
I have the same question about black. You know, like black isn't shiny, right? Black is black. Yet somehow it's predetermined that I'm going to take my base card and I'm going to put a lacquer of black over it, and now it's worth $125,999 more. You know what I mean? And you know, I'm in real estate, guys. So I use this analogy a lot of times with clients. I call it the red Porsche analogy. You know, you go into the dealership, and all your life you've wanted the red Porsche, and you go in there and they don't have a red one, but they got black. But fuck, you wanted red, and you're going to pay for that red because they're hard to get. I just don't understand the notion of someone else predetermining for me that these blacks are going to be worth to the moon, right? But that's the hobby, and that came from outside of wrestling. That's why I mentioned when Bret said that, you know, you guys have the unique perspective of having time in other sports while coming to wrestling. I get it. You know, I understand parallels are desirable, but like you, Drake, I wouldn't pay that. I would run for your Vince Superfractor many times over before I take that black rock prism. But that's just me. You know, there's a lot of people that, oh no, it's black, it's prism, it's the first one, you know. But it's like, yeah, okay, if you derive inherent value for that because someone is telling you that that's what it is. But you know, it's a tricky thing. You know, it's like art. You know what I mean? I remember seeing a show once on a guy that was being shown his painting that had just sold for like $3 million, and he painted it, and he says, you know, I always like this painting, but it isn't a house. He said, and, you know, and I get that.
You know, I lit like all the disposable income that I have, I spend on cards. Like that's what I do. That's what I like to spend my money on. But I understand, like, some people, they like luxury items, right? Toomey suitcases, Louis Vuitton bags, Rolex watches, and some people can't relate with how does someone spend this much money on a luggage, or how does someone spend this much money on a handbag? I think it's just like, it's the power of the brand, right? And I think like what you see in that rock card and the cost of the rock card and what it went for, it still blows my mind. But at the end of the day, when I look back at that card, I think about the power of the Prism brand and how it transcends wrestling cards. It just transcends sports cards. And to me, that sale wasn't about, yes, The Rock is The Rock and everyone knows him, but it was more like a testament to the Prism brand and its position in cards as being that flagship or premium brand. That exactly, yeah.
And sometimes these things again are artificial. We have a company up here called Canada Goose. They make parkas and coats and stuff like that, and they've been around forever. And they were not a bargain brand, but you know, you kind of think you could buy anywhere. And then about a decade, 15 years ago, they brought in this new management that kind of like what happened with Abercrombie and Fitch down in the States, that boosted the value or the consumer's impression of the value of these things. Now these Canada Goose jackets are like $1,200, where when I was a kid, you'd buy one for 50, right? Same brand, but it's just that sort of built up equity, I guess, that you get in some of these things. I don't understand the Black Prism phenomena, but I appreciate what it is, you know, and you know, God bless, you know, to the guys that have that kind of money in the first place. I mean, even you, Drake, you spend more than the average bear in our hobby, right? But I can understand your, you know, I can appreciate where and connect the value to the dollars, but on some of these things, I just can't, you know, and that's my thing with parallels in general and spending outrageous amounts of money, like, you know, we'll never see a six-figure wrestling card. Well, I should say never say never, but in the short term, I don't think that that's going to happen again anytime soon. So tell me before we wrap up, what do you think 2024 is going to bring us? We don't know what we're going to get Panini-wise. Hopefully we're going to see Elite, and there's going to be a couple more. And eventually the license is going to move over to Fanatics and Tops. You know, what are your plans? Just carry on with the same mode of collecting?
Yeah, I think so. I think just kind of keep doing what I'm doing. Try to uncover some of these hidden things that are out there. You mentioned the 2014 Chrome Rock like Superfractor. I'd love to, you know, the 2015. Just try to find other things like that. You know, and just continue looking for certain cards that I'd like to collect. But I think one thing that I shared with Bret, right, is you know, if we don't have stuff to open next year and there's not new stuff or whatever, I think that's okay, because then it gives you a chance to pause and actually spend time with the cards and, you know, and reflect on, you know, like when you got them and the story behind them and why you like them. Because it always feels like in the hobby, there's always a pursuit of just like, got to have more and the next thing, and I got to get this and all that. But I think it's like super important to reflect on like where you've been and what you really do have, you know, and it's kind of like, you know, the spirit of the season right now around Christmas time and all that. It's time to reflect of like just how blessed we are and what we do have, and not be focused on, you know, the next thing to come or like the next big thing or whatever. And so I think it's important to reflect. So I think when you say like, what does 2024 hold, right? There's going to be other cards that come to market, and there's going to be things that come out, and it's tough to predict the future. But I see 2024 more as like a year of reflecting on like what you do have, and just being excited and just really spending time with the cards that we own.
I agree 100%, because I was really chasing my tail for a while there, you know, when in the Panini era, when I was buying every set and trying to get all of them, and these were like 400 card sets, and it was craziness. So this respite for me has been good for sure, you know, just to sort of slow down, like you say, you know, catch my breath, because it was getting a bit out of hand.
Yep.
I think that I agree with everything Drake said. It'll be nice to kind of focus in on what I don't have that I want, that's been out there for a while. I will say I do hope that we get another Prism, another Select, another Immaculate set. I'm not holding my breath, but as a Roman Reigns collector, it'd be nice to be able to chase those cards. And also when the shoe drops on the other side with Fanatics and the takeover, like what's going to happen there? I'd be remiss not to mention, like, thinking about what we're seeing right now in another sport, but Fanatics, whether you like it or not, it's a marketing company. They're a marketing machine. We see what they've done with Bowman Chrome and integrating Tom Brady into that product, and the hype that they've built off of the chase of a Tom Brady baseball card. I mean, what's that look like for wrestling, right? What's that look like? And I know, Tony, you know this, like these wrestling guys are at conventions, they're front and center, they're making money, but like, what is a campaign like that to try to expose people to wrestling cards look like? I'm not sure Panini has been successful with doing anything like that, but I think while I might not agree on just like approach on every little tactic and every move, I think it might be good for wrestling cards and exposure in new areas. Because I'm not sure for the whole, stopping production or not having wrestling cards available is necessarily a good thing, because there are so many people who like the new stuff, who buy into breaks, and who are waiting to open packs and waiting every month for their cases to get to their doorstep. And I'm just a little concerned if that faucet gets turned off, do those people stay? Are they going somewhere else? And that's just something that I think we should all be thinking about as we're trying to navigate this new world, which it felt like it just became a new world a few years ago, and here we are again.
All right, guys, that's all I had. We normally wrap up by requesting an anecdote of our guests, a story from left field or something that pops into your head, or you've been on a lot of these shows. Is there anything that you've ever wanted to say that you haven't? I'll go to you first, Brett. Like, tell us something interesting.
Man, so is this like wrestling card related, wrestling related?
Hobby related, but
Okay.
As a collector, tell us a story that you've never told before, or something that's just sort of interesting to you.
Okay, so the power of people in relationships and connections in this hobby can't be understated. I've talked about this all the time on my show, but not thinking about relationships as a transaction is really important. And I feel like if you're authentic and you're real and you build the right relationships, you end up getting the cards that you want. And it wasn't long after I met our friend Adam Gelman, who everybody knows. You know how passionate he is. He's a community organizer. He's nonstop on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, just because the guy loves wrestling cards. And so he and I connected through, obviously wrestling cards, and he understood deeply that like I was in it because I really love Roman Reigns. He's my favorite wrestler ever, and I love collecting his cards. And so one of the solids Gelman did right out of the gates was he said, hey, like in one of my groups, somebody has a Roman Reigns 2021 Topps Chrome Superfractor for sale, and I think the sale went through and it's available again. And I just like, this is a card like high and wide I'd be searching for. I was like, you're kidding me, right? He's like, no. And he connected the dots with the seller, and I'm not going to talk about numbers here, but I DM'd the person. I didn't know this person. I said, hey, I hear from Adam Gelman that you have this card for sale. Is this true? And he goes, as a matter of fact, like the guy I was just getting ready to do the deal with said that like he didn't want to pay through PayPal or something. So the deal went through. And then I asked him, I was like, well, what are you guys working on? Like, what's the price? And he gave me the number. And again, back to how I think about these types of cards and other segments, my jaw almost dropped. And so I not only like, I said, I'm going to do you that. And as a matter of fact, like, I'm going to do you even more, because like, to me, the value of this card was like almost 5x what I'm getting, maybe even more than what I'm getting at. But I wanted to like make this guy know how serious I was and reward him for like giving me a crack at it. And so like when I think about my cards in my collection, like that card means so much to me because it's the dawning of a new character of Roman Reigns. It's the one of one, it's gold, it's shiny. It's the card I always think about when I think about my collection. And I would never have gotten that card if it wasn't for Adam Gelman saying, hey, by the way, there's this guy. And I think we kind of take that for granted sometimes in the hobby. So I share that story just to say, like, you got to build your tribe. Like, build your tribe. The more you share your cards, the more you build your relationships, the more cool cards are going to come your way.
Great.
That's kind of what I talk. It's kind of what I talk about the collector series. That's why I like it so much. Is that it helps bridge that those collectors together. We start kind of, like I said, putting faces to names and start building some kind of a community within the community almost. And it's like, hey, I know that Bret's the Roman Reigns guys like that. I know this guy and this guy. And so kind of brokering those deals in a way, through those relationships. So I'm kind of really proud about these card sets we've been putting out now this year. That one of my favorite things.
And even this video series, it was to take what we did with the cards and expand upon it, get into the minds of the top guys in the hobby, guys that are doing this every day, living and breathing. And, because again, you guys are, I hate to use the word influencers, but you guys are two of the top ones. You're certainly in the top 10 of collectors overall. And I just want to say thank you for that, for the time and effort that you guys have put into what you've done. Brett, specifically with your show. Drake, you're always helping people out, and it was great meeting you at the National and sitting with you on the panel and all that stuff. Drake, do you have a story for us before we get out of here?
Yeah, I do actually. So, as Brett was talking, a few were coming to mind, and I think it's just a community piece. So there's a gentleman in the hobby community, and his handle is Yamwax, and he and I talked, and gosh, this was like early 2021, maybe 2020. I don't remember the exact time now, and he'd reached out to me and was like, Drake, you're into wrestling cards. I saw this card you might be interested in, and I was like, sure, like shoot, like what is it or whatever. And he sends it over to me, and it was the Hulk Hogan Precious Metal Gem card from 2013. And he goes, you might be interested in that. And it was a BGS 9.5. And I was like, well, heck yeah. Like, because I knew in sports, precious metal gems were really cool. And I knew I liked Hulk Hogan growing up and that whole sort of thing. And so then I went and I looked and I clicked on the link to eBay or whatever. And it was like, buy it now, $750. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. This is cheap for a BGS 9.5, precious metal gem like Hulk Hogan.
How can I buy this twice?
Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, buy it now. And I've got it just really sitting kind of right over here. And so it was a neat story just about how, I was connected to him and he sent it to me, and it's one of those cards that he could have bought for himself. Right. But he knew that it was probably a card that I would be interested in. And so he sent that to me. And so I think you see that a lot in the wrestling community, just kind of what Brett said is people have, like in sports cards a lot, people will take the opportunity to buy a card knowing that someone else wants it, hopefully that they can upsell. And there's no problem with anybody trying to make money, right? But I feel more gratification and more satisfaction like when I find a card that somebody else wants. If I find a card that Brett wants, or you want Paul, or you want Tony, and I just send it to you and say, hey, you might be interested in this, and then the person buys it, right? Like that to me brings me a lot of satisfaction. And so I think that's one of the things that I try to, that people have paid that towards me, and I try to pay it forward to other people, which I think is really cool. So just that's the one quick story. The second one I'll share and be extremely brief, but I really wanted the OPC Hulk Hogan #1 from 1985, and I've been reaching out trying to find it and stuff like that. What a guy contacted me from Canada and told me, hey, you're looking for one of these. I have one. Let's chat or whatever. And he said, would it be okay if I called you? And I said, sure. So he called. We spoke on the phone for like an hour and a half. And anyways, his dad worked at the OPC factory where the cards were made. Wow. And he told me just a bunch of stories about how he would go down to the factory and see these cards and how they were made, and that he ended up just when the plant closed down or whatever, that he got a bunch of the cards and had them with him, and he ended up kind of going through and decided to get some graded and would sell some and would keep some and things like that. And it was just really neat to me to hear him talk about his dad's stories from when he worked for that company, and just the stories about the card and the way that it was cut and like that whole sort of thing. So it was just neat for me, it's neat getting cards, and it's less on that transactional aspect of it, and it's more about the historical and like the relational aspect of it is stuff that's really neat for me.
And that card now has a story behind it that you will always remember, and it makes it even more significant, I think, when you have that kind of history being told about something that you now have in your possession.
Yep, exactly.
Love it.
That's very cool. Okay, guys. Tony, anything else before we wrap it up?
No, I'm just thank you guys for coming on. It's like that. It's always fun chatting cards. I just love chat cards anyways, or at least hearing the stories now. I talk so much. That's why I'm very silent this episode, to let you guys tell your stories. It's always fun to hear you guys and where you're at in the hobby. And for me, and I know for Paul too, it's like that, being longtime wrestling card collectors, 30 plus years. of collecting wrestling cards and just seeing where we're at now today and some of the great minds and great collectors out there. And it's all about building relationships, guys. It really is. And it's okay to change your lane over the years too. I was also like Paul and Chuckster. I was a set collector, a master set collector. And, I tapped out in 06, 07 just because I couldn't keep up with parallels and stuff. So now being a Loomis collector, I mean, of all people to be just a random person to pick, and I'm having the most fun I've ever had collecting cards just because it's Loomis stuff. And like you guys, people are like, hey, Tony, I see this Loomis card. I know you're the guy who collects Loomis like that. You might want to jump on this. So I have more interactions because I become a Loomis collector or just a player collector than I ever was as a set collector. So no one ever said, hey, there's a master set over here, Tony, go buy it. Now it's all about like, hey, here's this cool little shiny gold Loomis card you might want to get. And I'm having fun. So
we're good that way. The hobby, because we're still small enough and we're still sort of at that stage where we quite haven't achieved critical mass, but a lot of us know each other. A lot of us reach out to each other. We could become friends. And that's why when there's atmosphere and distension, Tony and I don't like it, because we like this part of it, forging new relationships and building a hobby this way. Because like you say, Brett, like once you meet the right guy, a guy like Adam Gelman that's going to bend over backwards to help you when he knows what you collect and he's tied into so many things. These are the kinds of things that propel the hobby forward. So with that, why don't we go around the horn and give your coordinates, and then we'll call it a day, Brett.
Yeah. One final thing in closing, I feel like we just want to thank both of you guys for all you do. It felt like Drake and I were like in the squared circle a little bit, and you guys are like the announcers putting us over the whole time. So I do appreciate that. And all you do for the community, cards, content, all of that stuff. You can find me at Stacking Slabs on social media, and I release new episodes, podcasts on Wednesday and Friday where I talk about wrestling cards.
Awesome. Drake?
Yes, and thank you guys for having us on. Really enjoyed it and really enjoyed what you do for wrestling cards. And as you mentioned, it was great to meet at the National last year, and looking forward in 2024 in Cleveland. So I hope to see you there. But yeah, so Drake McGruder on Facebook, Twitter, X, whatever we want to call it. And then on Instagram, I'm at Drake's PC. So please reach out anytime.
My name is Paul Anand, and my quiet partner down below me, Tony Vela. You can reach us at WrestlingTradingCards.com or the Wrestling Card Price Guide, or on this channel, WTCtv. The collector series, we're going to be doing a lot more of these this year. We want to feature guys like Drake and Bret that are moving the hobby forward. Thanks again, guys, and we'll catch up with everyone soon.